We love to play the part of rational beings, but our brains pathologically hate boredom. We desperately need aliens, ancient curses, and magic just to justify the grayness of everyday life. We are ready to believe any nonsense just to avoid admitting the obvious. But harsh reality hits hard. The world is built in a frustratingly primitive way. While you feed yourself fairy tales about the paranormal, science has long since lanced this boil of ignorance. The greatest mysteries of humanity are not the schemes of reptilians, but physics, fungi, mold, and plain human stupidity. Welcome to the graveyard of shattered illusions. Prepare for an autopsy. Today we dissect a massive list of cult mysteries that charlatans still make millions on. Why is the Bermuda Triangle just an insurance scam? How did trendy wallpaper kill Napoleon and cheap canned food drive an entire fleet mad? Where did the diamond traces on Mayan skulls come from? And why were the Salem witches just bred with natural LSD? After this video, your worldview will lose its magic forever, but you will learn to see the truth. Starting the deconstruction, let's go. Number 1. Poseidon's insurance policy. Picture this: roaring Atlantic waves, a heavy leaden sky, a compass needle spinning wildly, and a ship's captain watching in horror as a greenish tentacle of an alien leviathan rises right from the abyss. This is exactly how movies and cheap magazines sold us this patch of water between Florida, Puerto Rico, and Bermuda for decades. We sincerely believed it housed a space-time rift, a portal to another dimension, or a reptilian base working as a giant vacuum cleaner for ships and planes. This beautiful legend was fed by our primal fears of the uncharted ocean. However, the harsh truth was hidden not at the bottom of the sea, but in the dusty ledgers of London clerks. Dry statisticians from the Lloyd's Insurance Company just took a calculator and counted the incidents. It turned out that exactly the same number of vessels sink in this mystical triangle as in any other area of the world ocean if you adjust for the colossal traffic. No glitches in the matrix, just basic math multiplied by bad weather and human stupidity. Apparently, the Sea Devil simply does not have a dedicated server for this region, and ships sink according to the standard rules of the physics engine. We were absolutely certain that the local natives, lacking even a proper wheel, physically could not move these multi-ton behemoths from the quarries to the coast. Naturally, the only logical conclusion for the mass consciousness suggested itself. Little green men flew in on flying saucers and used anti-gravity beams. The solution turned out to be insultingly mundane when two restless anthropologists decided to test the mechanics of the process in reality. They proved that the Polynesians simply tied 3 sturdy ropes to the idol and rocked it from side to side, forcing the massive stone to literally walk, waddling from foot to foot. This is a classic example of how our world's physics engine allows us to use a basic center of gravity instead of expensive special effects. Ancient people simply exploited a kinetic energy bug, and we attributed it to alien intervention. Number 3. Wet magic of the pharaohs. The scorching Egyptian sun beats down mercilessly, sweat pouring into the eyes of thousands of workers breaking their backs, trying to move stone blocks the size of a minivan. For centuries, architects scratched their heads, trying to understand how a Bronze Age civilization managed to erect such perfect geometric figures without heavy construction equipment. We made up theories about sonic levitation, Atlanteans, and forgotten high technologies of the gods. But physicists ruthlessly shattered this romantic aura by taking a closer look at ancient frescoes. It turned out that the secret to the Egyptian wonder of the world lay in a regular bucket of water. A worker walking in front of a giant wooden sled carrying a block would generously pour water onto the sand. This primitive operation changed the physical properties of the surface. Wet sand grains stuck together and sliding friction dropped by exactly half. In essence, the Egyptians just installed a day one patch for sand physics, optimizing the transportation process without using any alien cheat codes. Building the pyramids turned out to be a triumph not of a cosmic mind, but of sandbox-level hydrodynamics. Number 4. The snore of the Antarctic Cthulhu. Let's fast forward to the cold depths of the Pacific Ocean, where sunlight never reaches. In the late 90s, American military underwater microphones detected something unimaginable there. An ultra-low frequency sound of colossal power, dubbed the bloop. It was so loud that sensors thousands of kilometers apart picked it up. Naturally, conspiracy theorists immediately proclaimed that a giant sea monster had awakened at the bottom. A relic megalodon, or Lovecraft's elder god, tossing in his sleep before devouring humanity. We held our breath, waiting for an apocalypse from the abyss. However, in 2005, specialists loaded these audio files into a spectrum analyzer. It turned out that the mysterious monster was just a giant chunk of ice that broke off from an Antarctic glacier with a deafening crack. The grand acoustic spectacle was merely the sound of our planet dropping excess textures into the ocean. The great underwater beast turned out to be just a piece of frozen water that loudly left the chat. Number 5. Genetics against imposters. The 20th century gave us the most enduring legend of a lost princess. After the bloody massacre of the royal family in the basement of the Ipatiev house, stubborn rumors spread across Europe that the youngest daughter, young Anastasia, managed to escape the execution. We so desperately wanted a happy ending for this grim historical drama that for decades we believed dozens of women who surfaced from nowhere and demanded to be recognized as the miraculously saved princess. But cold, impartial science does not tolerate sentimentality. In 2007, the missing remains of the two youngest family members were found near Yekaterinburg. The world's best geneticists extracted deoxyribonucleic acid and put a fat period on this prolonged soap opera. Tests showed a 100% match. No one survived that meat grinder, and all the miraculous rescues were just an attempt by scammers to hack into someone else's inheritance database. The scriptwriters of reality rarely write happy endings for overthrown monarchs, preferring to delete files without the possibility of recovery. Number 6. Ice drift in the desert. Imagine the driest and hottest place on the planet, Death Valley. For decades, heavy boulders traveled across the perfectly flat bottom of a dried up lake, leaving long, winding furrows in the cracked clay. No one had ever seen them move. We built crazy theories about anomalous magnetic fields, gravitational anomalies, and invisible desert spirits. To catch the stones red-handed, researchers installed global positioning sensors and cameras on them. The answer turned out to be an elegant example of how nature uses climate system bugs. It was discovered that once every few years in winter, the valley gets covered with a paper-thin layer of water, which freezes at night, turning into a perfect skating rink. In the morning, the sun melts the ice, it cracks into massive sheets, and even a light gust of wind is enough to push multi-kilogram rocks across this slippery surface. The mystical wanderers turned out to be just participants in a very rare Winter Olympics for minerals whose physics settings temporarily glitched due to night frost. Number 7. The Diamond Lie of the Natives. You surely remember those creepy yet mesmerizing artifacts of perfect anatomical shape, carved from solid pieces of clear quartz. In museums, they were exhibited as the pinnacle of ancient Mayan magical technologies. We enthusiastically read articles about how these skulls could cure diseases and store holographic records of fallen civilizations. Their mystery stirred minds so much that even cinema dedicated an entire movie to them. But when these magical ancient servers were placed under the lenses of an electron microscope, the magic quickly vanished. On the smooth surface of the quartz, scientists discovered microscopic scratches left only by a rotating diamond-coated tool. The problem is that such jewelry drills were invented in Europe only in the 19th century. The ancient magic turned out to be a mundane startup by Victorian forgers, who realized that mysterious trinkets sell to collectors for much more than ordinary crystal. The beautiful legend collapsed under the weight of microscopic evidence, leaving gullible buyers with an expensive paperweight. Number 8. The Heavenly Snowball. The early 20th century, the remote Siberian taiga. Suddenly, the sky flashes with blinding light, followed by a monstrous roar, and a shockwave knocks down millions of trees over an area the size of a small European country. However, expeditions arriving at the crash site faced a phenomenal mystery. At the epicenter, there was neither a massive impact crater nor fragments of a cosmic body. We racked our brains for decades, putting forward the most fantastic versions, from an emergency landing of an alien cruiser to a failed experiment by Nikola Tesla. The real physics of the process turned out to be much more elegant. It was not an iron asteroid that came to visit us, but a giant cosmic comet consisting primarily of frozen gases and ice. Flying into the dense layers of the atmosphere at incredible speed, this interstellar snowdrift simply could not withstand the monstrous friction and exploded at an altitude of about 10 kilometers, turning into steam. Nature showed us the perfect crime without evidence, where the murder weapon literally melted into thin air, leaving us to deal with the knockdown textures of pine trees. Number 9. The demographic solvent. Imagine the damp and gloomy coast of North America in the late 16th century. A supply ship returns to the first colony of Roanoke, only to find abandoned houses with no signs of a struggle and a mysterious word carved into the palisade. The disappearance of hundreds of people became the New World's first great horror story. We fed ourselves tales of colonists abducted by vengeful forest spirits or carried into the heavens by the devil's messengers. But modern excavations and mass genetic code analysis of modern Native Americans tore the veil of mysticism from this story. Nobody opened a portal to the underworld. Due to severe drought and starvation, the English made the most logical decision. They simply packed their things and went to live with the neighboring friendly Croatoan tribe. Over a few generations, European genes simply dissolved into the local population. The bloody horror script turned out to be a story of how starving immigrants successfully assimilated with the local population to avoid a game over on the survival difficulty level. Number 10. Spy balloons made of foil. The mid-20th century, the sweltering New Mexico desert. Early one morning, a farmer finds strange fragments of foil and rubber on his ranch. Soon, the military cordons off the area, and the press explodes with headlines about a crashed flying saucer. Thus, the Roswell incident was born, giving us the iconic image of big-headed gray humanoids. We eagerly believed that the government was hiding antimatter engines. The truth turned out to be entirely earthly. Decades later, declassified documents revealed that this was Project Mogul. The American military launched giant clusters of weather balloons with microphones into the stratosphere to catch low-frequency sounds from Soviet nuclear weapon tests. When one of these microphones crashed onto a farm, it was easier for the military to let the public believe in Martians than to admit to spying on the Soviets. The aliens turned out to be just a smokescreen for geopolitical wiretapping, a perfect information virus that distracted attention from real security system patches. Number 11. The pocket humanoid. Let's fast forward to the arid sands of the Chilean Atacama Desert, where something that shook the foundations of biology was unearthed. It was a 15-centimeter skeleton with an unnaturally elongated skull. Visually, it looked like a textbook alien from a sci-fi horror movie. Ufologists around the world were popping champagne, claiming that an extraterrestrial race representative was right in front of us. However, specialists from Stanford University loaded a bone tissue sample into a deoxyribonucleic acid sequencer. The decoded results were tragic, but purely human. This was not a guest from another galaxy, but a premature female human fetus. The poor girl suffered from an incredibly rare and severe set of genetic mutations that catastrophically accelerated bone aging and deformed her skull. The biological code suffered a fatal crash while compiling the embryo, and we, in our desire to find brothers in intelligence, turned a medical error into a circus freak show. It seems logic has left the chat at this point, but we are just warming up. If you think that was a bug, just wait. Next up are the real coding errors. Number 12. The sandbox for gods. Let's rise high above the Peruvian plateau, where giant geometric figures and animal outlines stretch across the lifeless land, the so-called Nazca lines. You can only see them in all their glory from a bird's eye view. We were told that ancient people could not create such markings without aerial coordination. The most popular version claimed they were landing strips for interstellar shuttles. But when archaeologists decided to replicate the process, the mysticism vanished. The top layer of the desert is covered with dark pebbles, hiding light soil underneath. Ancient artists simply drove in primitive wooden stakes, stretched ropes to create straight lines, and methodically cleared the dark stones to the side. It was a giant piece of land art, created with sticks and incredible patience. Humanity decided it was a spaceport, but in reality, it was just a massive attempt to draw on the wallpaper of the universe using the clear textures function. Number 13. Toxic Pharaoh's Mold. Egypt, the Valley of the Kings, the early 20th century. The triumphant opening of Tutankhamun's untouched tomb turns into a series of sudden deaths among the expedition members. The newspapers of those years were filled with blood-chilling headlines about a curse that strikes anyone who dares to disturb a mummy's sleep. We gladly devoured these stories about magical protection and poisons. The public was especially shocked by the death of Lord Carnarvon from a rapid fever, but medical investigators discovered a much more prosaic killer. Over millennia, a microscopic fungus had luxuriantly grown in the absolute darkness and damp space of the sealed burial chamber. When archaeologists broke the ancient seal, they inhaled a dense cloud of this mold spores. The exhausted researchers with weakened immune systems contracted severe pneumonia. The ancient Egyptian magic turned out to be just an aggressive allergic reaction to expired biological materials. Apparently, the pharaoh's antivirus did not include protection against ordinary mold. Number 14. Rusty tears of a glacier. If you ever find yourself in the harsh wastelands of East Antarctica, your imagination will be shocked by a terrifying sight. A thick, bright red stream, strikingly resembling gushing blood, flows right out of a snow-white glacial monolith. We puzzled over this natural body horror for a long time. Conspiracy theorists preferred versions of hidden underground bases conducting bloody sacrifices, or ancient sleeping monsters. However, chemical analysis turned this thriller into a boring chemistry lesson. It turned out that beneath a kilometer-thick layer of ice hides an ancient lake, the water of which is incredibly oversaturated with dissolved iron. When this brine breaks out under massive pressure and comes into contact with atmospheric oxygen, an elementary chemical oxidation reaction occurs. Simply put, the water instantly rusts on the fly. The blood falls turned out to be just a leaking rusty pipe in our planet's cooling system, whose appearance scares unprepared users. Number 15. The Admiral's Lead Madness. In the mid-19th century, the ships of Franklin's expedition set off in search of northern routes and disappeared without a trace in the ice. Later, only scattered bones and evidence of cannibalism were found. For many years, this tragedy was considered a manifestation of evil fate or the revenge of harsh nature. It seemed to us that the sailors became victims of unknown demons. But when pathologists autopsied the perfectly preserved bodies in the permafrost, they found skyrocketing levels of toxic lead in the tissues. The solution turned out to be mockingly domestic. To provide the crew with food, the Admiralty ordered thousands of cans of preserves from a cheap contractor who carelessly sealed the seams with lead solder. Day after day, the sailors ate their rations, destroying their nervous systems. Severe poisoning caused paranoia and a complete loss of sanity. The pride of the British fleet was ruined by a tender system for buying cheap food, proving that budget cuts kill characters more reliably than any story bosses. Number 16. The Indian anti-corrosion bug. In the very heart of Delhi rises a massive iron pillar cast more than 1,500 years ago. Its phenomenon lies in the fact that it doesn't have a single speck of rust. We are used to thinking that ancient civilizations had access to lost knowledge about perfect alloys, or that the pillar was brought to Earth by stellar guests. The fairy tale of eternal metal crumbled when material scientists got down to business. The secret was hidden in a manufacturing defect by ancient metallurgists. Indian blacksmiths did not know how to completely purify the ore from impurities, so a massive percentage of phosphorus remained in the finished product. Upon contact with humid air, this element reacts and creates a paper-thin protective film on the surface that works as a perfect primer. The ancient miracle turned out to be the result of blacksmiths simply not fully clearing the material's source code of junk data, and this bug unexpectedly became the artifact's main feature. Number 17. Medieval Photoshop on linen. In the twilight of an Italian cathedral lies a long piece of cloth, the Shroud of Turin, on which the negative image of an exhausted male body faintly appears. For centuries, pilgrims sincerely believed it was the burial shroud of the Savior himself. We treated this artifact like the first holographic photograph in history. However, at the end of the 20th century, 3 different laboratories conducted radiocarbon isotope analysis, and their computers delivered a relentless result. The age of the fabric had nothing to do with the dawn of our era. The linen was woven between the years 1260 and 1390. A brilliant unknown Renaissance artist simply found a way to bake pigment onto the fabric, creating a perfect fake long before the advent of digital editors. The greatest mystery of faith turned out to be just brilliantly executed medieval fan merch that passed the test of time before the invention of advanced anti-cheats. Number 18. A romantic's gravitational bluff. Imagine Florida in the first half of the 20th century. A small immigrant, Ed Leeds Calnan, single-handedly under the cover of night builds an entire coral castle out of blocks weighing tens of tons. He claimed he figured out how to control gravity using magnetism. We were thrilled by this story of a solitary genius who tricked the laws of physics for love. Tour guides swore he made the stones levitate. This myth of a magical server with disabled gravity would have lived on if not for some curious teenagers teenagers. They sneaked onto the property and filmed the magic in progress. It turned out the cunning builder didn't possess telekinesis, but he masterfully knew mechanics. He used a complex system of ordinary winches, blocks, and levers, perfectly distributing the weight. The grandiose violation of the laws of physics turned out to be a clever use of a counterweight system. The illusion of levitation is just hidden scripts of classic strength of materials where there is no place for magic. Number 19. A brick diet for ghouls. While excavating old European cemeteries, archaeologists regularly stumbled upon creepy graves. Skeletons lay with massive bricks smashed into their jaws. We decided this was undeniable proof of the existence of vampires. Our ancestors believed the dead came out at night to drink blood, so they blocked their mouths with heavy objects. But an examination of the bones revealed traces of severe consumption, known to us as tuberculosis. This disease caused people to cough up blood, which bubbled on the lips of the deceased, and due to weight loss, the skin paled and stretched. In a state of total ignorance, terrified peasants simply mistook the symptoms of a severe lung infection for a transformation into a monster. People fought a biological virus using construction materials, trying to ban a user who had already been deleted by nature itself, proving that fear is the worst system administrator. Number 20. The Mayan climate apocalypse. Majestic pyramids swallowed by the dense jungles of Central America. The Mayan civilization simply vanished in the 9th century, abandoning their cities. We love fantasizing about this topic. Theories range from a mass abduction of an entire people by an alien fleet to the opening of a spatial portal. The answer was found in dark caves. Climatologists analyzed layers of ancient stalagmites, which grow drop by drop over millennia. These stone flash drives preserved an exact weather log for past centuries. The data showed that a monstrous drought lasting a whole century hit the region during that period. Without rain, the complex Mayan agricultural system simply collapsed. There were no stargates, only a global glitch in the watering system that led to plain starvation. The civilization simply couldn't survive a prolonged lack of content updates in the form of rainfall. Number 21. Evolutionary Frankenstein. In the early 20th century, archaeologists excavated fragments of the Piltdown man's skull from a quarry in England. It had a human brain case, but an absolutely ape-like jaw. It was considered the missing link, the bridge between primate and human. For almost half a century, we included it in biology textbooks. Only 40 years later, a chemical analysis of the bones turned this academic triumph into the greatest disgrace. It turned out the find was a blatant fake. An unknown hoaxer simply took the skull of a regular human, attached the lower jaw of a deceased orangutan, filed down the teeth, and stained the bones with chemicals. Scientific minds wanted to find this puzzle piece so badly that they gladly swallowed a shoddy mod slapped together from two different textures. Evolution didn't make such abrupt leaps. Someone just decided to compile two incompatible files as a prank on the scientific community. Number 22. The Crystal Compass of Barbarians. How did fierce, bearded Vikings manage to cross the vast expanses of the ocean in thick fog long before the invention of the magnetic compass? We sincerely believed they were driven by some primal animal intuition or shamanic rune magic. Legends mentioned a certain sunstone, but it was considered a metaphor. However, discoveries by underwater archaeologists proved that the poetry was actually a highly technical manual. This artifact turned out to be an Iceland spar crystal. Thanks to its unique optical properties, this mineral works like a natural polarizing filter. They only had to hold the crystal up to the sky, even in dense fog, and it would start glowing solely when pointed exactly at the sun hidden behind the clouds. Viking magic turned out to be just an advanced hardware gadget utilizing a photon scattering bug in the atmosphere. The optical plugin worked flawlessly even without a network connection. At this stage, the reality scriptwriters apparently went to lunch and left the plot to an intern. Do you smell that? That's the smell of a burning common sense processor. Number 23. Hallucinogenic Puritan bread. Late 17th century, the austere Puritan town of Salem. Suddenly, several girls start having convulsions and complaining of bites from invisible demons. The town is gripped by hysteria, which ends in witch executions. We are used to viewing this as an example of fanaticism based on a belief in the devil, but toxicologists suggested a chemical cause for this obscurantism. It turned out that the hysteria was preceded by a damp summer. Ergot, a parasitic fungus, bloomed wildly in the rye fields. This parasite contains substances that cause intense hallucinations. The poor Puritans simply baked bread from the infected flour and, as a whole town, went on a deep acid trip. What they thought was an invasion of Satan was actually poisoning from low-quality food textures. A bug in the harvest algorithm led to mass psychosis among the users. Number 24. The pop of an empty barrel. In the second half of the 19th century, the brigantine Mary Celeste was found drifting in the ocean. Not a soul on board, but the ship was absolutely intact. This became the gold standard for maritime mysteries. We eagerly made up stories about giant squid attacks or alien abductions. The answer lay in the hold, where a batch of alcohol was being transported. Historians concluded that several barrels had leaked. Fumes built up in the confined space, and a spark caused a small pop that blew off the hatches. The captain, fearing an imminent explosion, gave the order to evacuate to a lifeboat, but the ship never caught fire, and the tethered lifeboat with the people was torn away by a squall and swept into the abyss. The crew died because of a false fire alarm, abandoning a perfectly functioning server for a lifeboat that turned out to be full of critical errors. Survival in the ocean does not forgive panic pressing the log out button. Number 25. Royal parking. The famous English monarch Richard III remained a ghost in history books. Legends claimed his body was thrown into a river or secretly buried in an unknown crypt. We searched for his remains for hundreds of years, hoping to find lost dungeons. It seemed the earth itself had swallowed the ruler, but in 2012, a group of enthusiasts armed themselves with radars. The king's mutilated skeleton was calmly found under a layer of cheap asphalt in a regular municipal pay and display parking lot in the city of Leicester. DNA analysis perfectly matched his modern descendants. A ruler whose name terrified half of Europe had been lying under the wheels of hatchbacks for centuries. The scriptwriters of history loved this kind of brutal sarcasm. The finale of a great monarch turned into a £2 an hour parking space. The heroic epics of the past often end with infrastructure objects of questionable quality being built on top of them. Number 26. A bloody algae shower. In the early 2000s, the sky over a southern state of India turned dark, and a torrential rain the color of fresh arterial blood poured down on the residents. The drops left creepy red stains. The local population fell into a panic, deciding it was the wrath of the gods. Ufologists immediately put forward a hypothesis about an alien biomass. We stared mesmerized at these red puddles, expecting an intervention, but microbiologists only sighed wearily. Under the lenses of microscopes, it wasn't demon blood, but billions of microscopic spores of green algae. The wind had simply picked up a colossal amount of these organisms from the ocean, lifted them into the clouds, and rained them down on the city. A biblical plague turned out to be a mundane glitch in the pollen circulation system, when nature accidentally mixed up the color palette folders while rendering rain. The apocalypse was cancelled due to a technical error on the local Flora's servers. Number 27. The neon backlight of the ocean. For centuries, old sailors told tall tales about a milky sea. They swore that sometimes at night, the ocean begins to glow with an eerie whitish blue light. We considered these stories the result of rum and spending too much time under the sun. It sounded like classic maritime folklore. But in the early 2000s, orbital satellites took pictures of Earth's night surface and suddenly confirmed these tales. The cameras captured a patch of glowing water the size of an entire country. Researchers found that this effect is created by an incomprehensibly massive cluster of luminescent bacteria of one specific type. Trillions of microorganisms simultaneously turn on their chemical backlight. The ocean didn't go crazy. Nature just sometimes turns on mass pixel illumination, as if testing the globe's backup lighting system. The sailors saw the truth. Their graphic adapters just couldn't correctly interpret the bioluminescence. Number 28. A genetic remix of cavemen. For a long time, anthropologists painted a picture where our direct ancestors, the Cro-Magnons, committed total genocide against their rougher cousins, the Neanderthals. We considered ourselves the winners in a ruthless race for survival. It flattered our ego. But with the development of genome decoding technologies, the old textbooks had to be rewritten. It turned out there was no global extermination. Our ancestors simply engaged in mass crossbreeding with their neighbors. Analysis showed that every modern human outside of Africa has from 1 to 3% Neanderthal deoxyribonucleic acid splashing in their blood. They didn't go extinct, they simply downloaded into our database. The ancient conflict between the two species was resolved not by an epic battle to the death, but by a mundane corporate merger through genetic acquisition. We are those very Neanderthals, just with installed interface updates. Number 29. Local delivery of megaliths. Stonehenge is the most mainstream mystical monument on the planet. Giant arches stand in the middle of a field, inspiring awe. For decades, we fantasized about where these multi-ton sarsens were delivered from. Theories amazed with their scale, from druid teleportation to the hypothesis that the stones were carried through the air by the wizard Merlin. Alien transport also featured in theories, but in the year 2020, chemists conducted a spectral analysis. It turned out no one dragged the stones from the other side of the world. They were carved in the ordinary West Woods quarry, just 25 kilometers from the monument. Ancient builders didn't possess magic. They simply knew how to organize a crowd to deliver materials from the nearest hardware store. The great mystery of logistics shattered against the fact that humans have always preferred to save money on courier services, even in the Neolithic era. Number 30. The sparkling paint of the Zeppelin. The Hindenburg airship disaster, which turned into a blazing inferno in seconds, killed the era of aeronautics. For many years, we believed it was a terrorist attack, a planted bomb, or a saboteur's shot. Society demanded to find a villain, but combustion experts concluded that the culprits were not spies, but a foolish mistake by chemists. The hydrogen inside the balloons could not have ignited so easily on its own. The problem lay in the fabric of the outer envelope, which was generously soaked in a compound based on aluminum powder. Essentially, the engineers accidentally coated the entire airship in thermite explosive components. The airship flew into a thunderstorm, built up a static charge, and a tiny spark ignited this paint. The Zeppelin era burned down not because of a conspiracy, but because someone didn't read the manual for chemical textures when painting the hull. A bug in the security code turned into a catastrophic file deletion. Number 31. The Cardinal's secret clerk. Literature gave us the image of a Bastille prisoner, whose face was hidden beneath the iron mask. We loved believing the writer Alexandre Dumas, who convinced the whole world that beneath the metal hid the king's twin brother, a victim of intrigue. It was a perfect plot about royal blood. However, modern archivists ripped the mask off this story. It turned out the prisoner's name was Eustache Dauger, and he didn't have a drop of blue blood. He was a simple valet to Cardinal Mazarin. His only crime was accidentally seeing secret accounting documents which revealed that the King of France was stealing money from the treasury of an English ally. The poor guy was locked behind bars simply because he had blackmail material on the server administrator. The mask turned out to be just a harsh physical non-disclosure agreement for a corporate secret without the right of appeal. Number 32. The Emperor's designer wallpaper. After the death of the exiled Napoleon on an island, a sensation swept the world. Toxicologists found doses of arsenic in the commander's hair. We immediately drew up images of British agents spiking the defeated enemy's wine with poison. This detective plot fit the tactician's biography perfectly, but reality turned out to be much more mocking. In those years, an emerald green color was insanely popular for interiors. The dye for this wallpaper was made using arsenic. The island's humid climate meant that the paint on the bedroom walls was constantly covered in mold, which processed the arsenic into a volatile gas. Napoleon did not fall victim to assassins. He spent days breathing the fumes from his own expensive renovation. The death of the greatest tactician turned out to be the result of choosing overly toxic textures for his final location. Number 33. Dynamite archaeology. For millennia, the ancient city of Troy from Homer's Iliad was considered a beautiful fiction, a fairy tale about gods. Academics smiled condescendingly, claiming it was just a myth with no coordinates. We were used to thinking of it as just an ancient blockbuster. This illusion was destroyed by a self-taught archaeologist, Heinrich Schliemann. He took a volume of poetry, trusted it like a navigator, arrived at a hill in Turkey, and literally began blowing up the ground with dynamite. And to the horror of the academic world, beneath the layers of earth, he actually found the ruins of the great city. The greatest myth of antiquity turned out to be pure documentary. It is as if someone found Stark's office, proving that comics were based on real events. Sometimes the system hides the main Easter eggs in plain sight, waiting for players to have the audacity to use brute force to hack the level. And just like that, step by step, science and time format the hard drive of our delusions, erasing beautiful legends and leaving in their place a cold, yet incredibly ironic truth. We peer into the darkness of centuries, hoping to see magic, aliens, or a divine plan, but we find only broken winches, expired canned food, poisonous wallpaper, and genetic bugs. But does this make our world any more boring? On the contrary, the realization that reality is cobbled together from random errors, physics, and plain human laziness makes this simulation only more interesting. The doors to our exhibition of system crashes are closing, but the archives of the Library of Stupidity are boundless. Now it's your turn to update our database. Tell us in the comments what fact number 34 should be. What famous human mystery would you like us to take apart pixel by pixel next time? See you in the new reality updates, and remember, if something seems mystical to you, chances are you just haven't read the patch notes for this world.